Good day, folks. Everything new under the sun. This is an addendum to the electromagnetic pulse video I did yesterday. More information coming out, more speculation, of course. Take everything you hear with a grain of salt. There's information warfare on both sides, misinformation, disinformation, all those new buzzwords. That's happening. It's also known as the fog of war, and in this case. And there's more speculation going around about EMPs, even in the Russian state media, which makes me wonder if they're kind of normalizing it, getting it on the thoughts and minds of the Russians, selling it to them, if you will, before something actually occurs. And the bar is fairly low as it relates to using EMPs. Because Russia sees them as cyber warfare and not as a specific nuclear detonation. So the bar for them is set very low. So they would easily be able to or reconcile using one of these because it doesn't necessarily harm people or even buildings. Just takes out electronics. So let's read a little bit about what this is. NATO members speak of shock and awe. Russia will fry Ukraine with an electromagnetic pulse. They are preparing for the supersonic Zircon. So they're preparing to tip Zircon missiles with nuclear warheads that are set up and configured to make the most of an electromagnetic pulse. So the British and the Americans are talking about a blow that will cause shock and awe in the Ukrainian army, who confirmed the revealing publication to War News 247 and emphasized that the Russian army will strike with a special weapon that will cause an EMP pulse. It says if the Zircon missile is used, then the first supersonic electromagnetic EMP attack in history will take place. So Zircon missile, what's this about? Do the Russians have these missiles? What are they? So this is a recent article, November 12th, yesterday. Russian Defense Ministry orders additional batch of hypersonic, so these are hypersonic missiles, Russians report. The order should be completed in 2023, according to Russian media. Russian dictator Putin stated November 2021 that tests of the hypersonic Zircon cruise missile were being completed in Russia. It would be ready for use by the Russian Navy in 2022. So, of course, we're at the end of 2022. The Zircon is a two-stage rocket, the first stage of which is equipped with a solid-state propellant rocket engine, the second stage with a direct-flow air jet engine. The flight range can be up to 600 kilometers. So it's kind of a short range, if you will. It's not coming to the West. It's not coming to North America. But these are hypersonic missiles, and they can be tipped with this a nuclear warhead that can cause an EMP. So that's what this article is talking about, the Zircon missile, which is ready to go, hypersonic, and Russia's ordering more of them. I wonder why. Because NATO doesn't have a lot of defense, if any at all, against hypersonic weapons at this point, and the U.S. military is really trying to catch up. These weapons designed to create a powerful pulse of energy and short-circuit electrical and electronic equipment such as computers, generators, satellites, radios, radar receivers, and even traffic lights could disable Ukraine's army and civilian infrastructure. So not only the army, but think of the utilities, water, electric in the city. All those things are potentially down because they're all run by microcontrollers. They're all run by computers. Well pumps for city water, etc. This is all run by computer in this day and age. And so it could take out all of this, not just military assets or targets. It could leave the country without light, heat, and communications and transportation. So the civilians and the military wouldn't even be able to escape because potentially the buses, the cars would all be disabled. That's the potential of this. EMP attacks were amply explained, even publicized on Russian state talk shows. So they're getting ready. They're getting the public ready, I think, primed for the use of this. They're kind of normalizing it, putting it out to the public so that when it happens, the public will know what it is and be accepting of it, basically. And they're probably selling it as, again, a non-lethal sort of defense weapon. A Russian colonel has shown in the air with maps how such an explosion might work. This is apparently on Russian TV talk shows that the Russians have seen. in the Baltic Sea. Perhaps Putin and his generals have been warning us about the possibility all along with their cryptic threats to unleash unspecified military technical measures. And you know what? They know that this could take out pretty much all, I would suggest that a lot of NATO doesn't have significant defenses. This would be catastrophic, I think, for most of NATO equipment. There is hardened military equipment, but I don't think anybody knows the extent of what this sort of thing could cause. Now, one bomb in Kherson isn't going to do a lot, but if there's a couple on hypersonic missiles that that the U.S. can't stop, and they blow up in several strategic areas, you could have a significant degradation of communications. And the suggestion is that this could take out satellites above it, depending on where, if they do an airburst, which is the best opportunity to use EMP because it goes the farthest distance and makes use of that EMP electromagnetic pulse. It kind of exploits that feature of nuclear weapons. It could affect satellites above it as well. A relatively small EMP, easily deployed at high altitude by Russia's supersonic Zircon cruise missile, which Russia has ordered and has well tested, might not destroy buildings or kill anybody. And this is why NATO might just let this go without getting into country-to-country combat and direct military intervention. Because if it doesn't kill anybody, if it doesn't destroy buildings, then all the citizens of the world will say, there's no point getting involved. They're not killing people. But ultimately, this will sway the war in Russia's favor. But it could permanently disable electrical circuits across thousands of square miles of Ukrainian territory. Almost all defense equipment deployed by NATO and NATO allies in Ukraine, such as radios, GPS, navigation, aerial drones, depends on electronics for deployment, maintenance, and integration. The lingering electromagnetic effects of a hit could destroy 90% of satellites above the affected zone. So this is one of those things. Are there a lot of satellites, peering into Ukraine, trying to understand what's happening on the ground, trying to understand military maneuvers? Yeah. So if they do an EMP, this apparently could take out a lot of the satellites that are directly overhead at the time of the explosion. And so that would be obviously a very key thing for Russia. I think it was David Pine on Canadian Prepper, the interview there. He said the first sign that Russia's going, effectively starting overt or open World War III is that they would go after the communications, the satellites. So that would be the first indication that they're going all out and they've triggered World War III. They're going to go after all the communications because if you can't communicate, you can't control your army effectively. You have no eyes on the ground as to what's happening. Your eyes and ears are basically closed at that point. So it's interesting. And so this would be a very valuable weapon for Russia to use. And something, again, that would get underneath the NATO radar, I think, for direct intervention. In Kherson, a tactical EMP could disable the systems that operate the area's dams. So the dams will start having trouble. It will clog highways and bridges with miles of vehicles, as vehicles are disabled immediately in the blast area and immediately in the EMP area. Those cars have computers. Your car has a little computer on board. If that computer doesn't operate, that car does not operate either. Could be a good time to get an older car that doesn't have a computer on it. But this is a very real threat. You'd have miles and miles of cars just strung out on the road, absolutely disabled, wrecked, overloaded. The circuit's overloaded. The computer's not working, and therefore the computer control systems of the motor will not allow the motor to start. It says, and leave the civilian population scrambling for food because, cars, trucks, trains would not be operating potentially. And heat and cold, I would add. Heat and cold, depending on what the weather is doing, because computers control everything. They control the transport of goods and services. They also control heat and cold. Look in your house. Do you have a thermostat? Likely you have a digital thermostat. That's a little computer. That could potentially be overwhelmed by an EMP if there's a significant proximity to a blast. So think of all the things in your house that have little chips on board, and those are things that could potentially be disabled via an EMP if it's strong enough, if it's significant enough. So you have a lot of things that are happening where you can't even control your furnace if one of these things goes off, let alone try and get food from anywhere. Putin. in the meantime, could rebuild and resupply its forces. Maybe this is why they went south of the river. Do I have this image? So they drew back from Kherson. They're now south of the river on the bottom side, on the left-hand side, they say. An EMP could disable the operations of the dam. There was a video actually today of part of the a dam. Where is it? The Kakhovka dam was blown up by Russians, I think preventing Ukrainians to getting across. There's actually video of that on another article here. What is perhaps most troubling, the article says, is that Russia and NATO have such different approaches to these weapons. According to Russian military doctrine, EMP strikes are a branch of information, cyber, and electronic warfare. This means it's not a deployment of a tactical nuclear weapon causing radiation, but in fact part of their cyber warfare doctrine. That means it's an easy weapon to use for them. They don't have to go through a lot of checks and balances. It doesn't kill civilians. It doesn't damage structures very much. And so they would get away with that. And that would hugely, massively help on the battlefield. I think they're just holding on to that because nobody knows what a widespread EMP blast would cause in the technological world that we live in today. It's never been done. There's been tests, but no one's seen a real life example of really what a significant wartime EMP would cause, and the chaos, the devastation, and the computer chips. Nobody has any idea of how many computer chips in all the stuff that you have in your house or in cars, etc., would be affected. Now, again, it depends on the proximity. You have to be pretty close to an EMP for it to really cause trouble. And these are a lot of things that we don't know. What is the end effect of this? This lowers the bar and may make EMPs even more enticing for Putin's strategists. Again, they can use one of these with impunity. NATO's not going to come after them because no civilians are getting killed, so the rest of the world effectively doesn't care at that point. So that's a very interesting thing and thought about what is Russia doing, what have they been doing. They've been pulling their forces back, evacuating, even telling citizens to evacuate because there's some plan that they have, and the evacuation is pretty much done at this point. Now the question is, are they actually considering using nukes? Apparently they talk about it, and when are they going to use it? If the rhetoric and the chatter, if you will, is increasing about this sort of weapon, I think they've heard from. I think what they could do is get these words into the public sphere, and look at what people and leaders all around the world are saying about them. And certainly the leaders around the world, the red line is a nuclear weapon. And they're probably doing the same here. They're probably watching the chatter of the rest of the leaders of the world and seeing what they think about EMPs. And if the rest of the leaders don't really care about an EMP or consider it a red line, then that could be a valid kind of under the radar, quote unquote, weapon that Russia could use, which with great advantage to themselves and to their military positioning, but that would get under the radar, under the red line, if you will, of a greater NATO conflict. With Russia has no interest. They want to take Ukraine, and they don't have particular interest to go toe to toe with the U.S. Although it's a proxy war, obviously, and they know it. But they don't have any interest in open nuclear war. So an EMP really is the modern day nuclear weapon, if you will, that doesn't hurt civilians necessarily, again, but takes out all the electronics we've come to rely on in this modern world. So, folks, this is a very interesting situation in Russia, and rhetoric is picking up about this EMP, about the potential for it. Do these various leaders and people talking about this know something that we don't know? Certainly it looks by their Russians' movements that they are, and it would do everything. Everything would be in Russia's favor, I think, for using one of these from all sorts of strategic sides of the picture there. So, folks, I'll leave it there, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.